Let's bring in our panel to talk about this, Heather. Bob McEwen, former Ohio Congressman, Jesse Jane Duff, retired gunnery sergeant, U.S. Marine Corps, and Newsmax contributor Derrick, Hollie, member of Project 21 and former Trump appointee. And the numbers we're talking about here are astounding to a lot of folks. I mean, if you're as old as you remember the old thing, a billion here, a billion there, pretty soon you're talking money. We're talking trillions now, 1.2 trillion in an infrastructure program. And then they've gotten the framework through. Now, this is not law. It hasn't been passed even as a bill. But Derrick, we're talking about another $3.5 trillion on top of $1.2 trillion, if it gets through the House, of spending. And our national debt is already approaching $30 trillion. Inflation is over 5%, and in certain select areas, it's over 40%. If you're looking, for instance, compared to last year, energy, the cost of used cars and trucks, things like that. What's going on?
Well, you know, Bob, two things I'll add to that. It's a long ways from being law, passed as a bill for sure. But the other thing is we have to be concerned that, you know, a lot of the money that was allocated from the last bills have not been spent. Mm-hmm. It's been reported right now that a lot of these states have not allocated the funds to the individuals who need them right now in terms of these moratoriums that were put in place for people with housing and those kinds of things. So there's a lot of money still on the table unspent. And so now we're going to talk about spending trillions and trillions more. It does not make sense. And I hope someone stands up and says, yo, Congress, we can't do this right now. Not right now. Let's make sure this other money has been spent that we've already allocated.
Yeah, Heather, it also seems as though Representative Pelosi, the speaker, she wants to put these together and pass these all together and to make it look like it's bipartisan. But in fact, they don't have any Republican votes right now for $3.5 trillion.
Yeah, but they don't necessarily need it if they're going to pass it through reconciliation. Right. And she has flat out said that she will not bring it up until the other is passed, and that she would bring them both up together. During his remarks earlier, President Biden also defended the rising prices that Derrick was just talking about, especially gas prices. Here's what he had to say. Listen.
We're taking action to address gas prices as well. Today, gas prices are lower than they were early in this decade, but they're still high enough to create a pinch on working families.
So, you know, Bob, I think that ultimately is going to end up being the question here. You know, why do this? Why do this at all, first of all, with this big of a ticket, but why do it right now?
Yeah, I don't know if you're asking me, Bob, or Bob McEwen, but let's assume it's Bob McEwen. Bob, right. you've been inside the Beltway. You know how this works. Give us some insight as to what's going on.
Well, you can see what they're up to. As you know, a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. Only $110 billion of this is for roads and highways. Mm-hmm. Everybody in America is in favor of improving our roads and highways, and yet that's exactly the opposite of what they're doing. They have a new thing in this bill called traffic calming. Now, you know what traffic calming is? That is artificially creating gridlock. They want to make it as miserable as possible to drive. There's sections in here to do away with highways, to tear them down, and then in addition to $85 billion for electric. Now, you can imagine they have brownouts in California. They haven't built dams. They haven't built power plants. They can't use coal, haven't used nuclear power, and yet we want to put everyone in electric cars. And where in the world would they? So this bill is representative of their goal to fundamentally change America.
Yeah, and Jesse Jane, as Heather was pointing out, this could be passed with just Democratic votes. That doesn't mean they'll get all of them, but that's what they're trying to do here.
Yeah, they want to have it so that it's a bipartisan bill. And, you know, we have a few turncoats on the conservative side that very well may join. But it looks like right now that they won't. And Nancy Pelosi doesn't like that perception of it being a partisan bill. Neither would Chuck Schumer. They want to ensure that they can take the Republicans down with them, so to speak. But when we're talking about energy independence, and here Joe Biden has the audacity to talk about gas prices being the higher they've ever been since, he couldn't even go back a couple of years. He had to go all the way back to a decade of when they were this high. I'm sorry. filling up the tank of gas right now is absurd. So they gloat over the rising wages that have gone up 4%, but they're not talking about the inflation that's gone up 5.5% and is expected to hit 6%. So essentially, all of the profit that anybody is making is being wiped out by the rising costs of food and gas and all of the other costs. Let's also look at how landlords now can't even collect rent, but the mortgage companies are able to still collect. And if they don't, a lot of these people are going to have to sell their properties, which is going to help those big banks that are basically funding the Democratic Party. I mean, this is all corruption on so many levels of scratching backs and enabling Green New Deals when it has very little to do with infrastructure, as we have identified. It's disgraceful that the American people know that they've elected these people. We have got to put a stop to it. 2022 can't come fast enough right now for conservatives.
Yeah. You know, Heather, one of the things that strikes me. Go ahead, Derrick. Were you going to say something?
No, Jesse Jane just nailed it with some of the things she said. I mean, particularly with this energy things, guys. I was just before the House Select Committee on the climate crisis. And right now, the biggest thing, I gave testimony, and the biggest thing that's coming out of Washington right now as it relates to energy is this whole thing of environmental justice. And, you know, you say, okay, environmental justice, Derrick, you have to be down with environmental justice, but it's under the guise of shutting down the oil and gas industry. And it's so hypocritical in terms of what they're doing, in terms of right now, we can't even get the renewable and the natural resources we need to even do the renewables for solar right now. Because everybody, these environmental groups and everybody right now, keep it in the ground, and it makes no sense. And so right now, the solution, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead. You're right on it, Derrick.
I talk about energy all the time. And so, you know, 2019, Jesse Jane just alluded to it, we became energy independent in 2019, overtaking Saudi Arabia and Russia, becoming the #1 exporter of oil and natural gas in the world, okay? So it begs the question, how can our natural resources be worthy enough for the rest of the world, but not good enough for us right here at home? And that's the garbage that the Democrats are selling, their message, this narrative that they're driving, and the media companies, the ABC media outlets are allowing them to do it and helping them with this message. We have to do a better job. The industry has to do a better job.
And Heather, the White House sent out a note today asking OPEC to produce more oil.
Yeah. Saudi Arabia and OPEC produce more oil while pressuring U.S. oil producers to drill less. It makes absolutely no sense at all on multiple
Unless
levels.
you want America to be dependent again as it was. To destroy its energy independence, you close down the pipelines, you do not allow them to drill, you don't give any more permits. And then, of course, you ask our enemies to produce enough oil so that we can survive. It's exactly what we're going to talk about, what's happening in Afghanistan. In order to revert America, it got independent, it stopped our enemies, we were free, and now we're going right back in the opposite direction again.